Hi, this is Rick Frederick. I'm reviewing an article by Brubacher, Poole, and Dickinson called The Use of Ground Rules in Investigative Interviews with Children, a Synthesis and Call for Research. So this is a review paper, really helpful if this is an area of research for you to think about what are the elements of interviewing that have yet to be established effectively through research. So there's good discussion in this article about ground rules, what they do, what they may not do, whether they're effective, whether there are developmental differences between children, and so why are there ground rules, and what do they look like? So if you're going to do a forensic interview with a child about a claim or concern about childhood sexual abuse or some other abuse that may lead to prosecution, and you're doing a forensic interview, you're collecting information that will be presented at trial against a defendant. There are some structures for these interviews, and there are some general consensus about sorts of ways that you go about conducting these interviews. And so some of those ground rules might include things like telling the child you don't know what happened, to ask the child to correct you if you make a mistake, to tell the child, hey, I may ask you some questions over, with the suggestion that it doesn't mean that I don't believe you. I may be asking it again. To tell you when they don't understand what you're talking about, or to just tell you when they don't know something that you asked them. Ground rules make a lot of sense, and these are things that folks who conduct forensic interviews are taught to practice. But the real question of this article is, are they important? And when are they important? And why are they important when they're important? And so why would you question this? Well, in daily life, children generally talk to people who know them, and that they have a shared life and shared experiences, and then you're talking to somebody who already has an idea of what's happening with the child. And children tend to answer questions from adults whether they understand them or not. Do ground rules overcome that? That's sort of what the paper is getting at. If children are going to answer questions and they're going to conform their answers, the thing that I missed here is that children expect that adults expect answers to questions and want them to learn from what the conversation is about, that the conversation isn't merely that you have with your parents, say, or your caretakers, isn't just an information gathering device. It's a teaching device. And the real question is, do ground rules overcome this style of interaction with the children are accustomed to? So obviously it makes sense that you would then explain ground rules in an optimal way to make them powerful, to overcome what is already a tendency of a child just to answer a question because an adult's asking it. You don't use complex vocabulary, so on and so forth. And just because your questions are open-ending doesn't mean that you aren't exerting an influence on the child. The authors talk about the Cornerhouse protocol, the RATAC, that there is some sort of interactional style here where the interviewer is actively engaged in looking for problems and then giving instructions based on that. But the Cornerhouse model does include ground rules at the beginning. So even though ground rules are standard in protocols, there's not a consensus on their format, placement, or extent. Again, this is a review article. There's a long review of these differences. And then there's a long review of the cognitive skills that vary according to the ages of the children. Another a developmental characteristic that's not often thought about, but is a metacognition. And that's the capacity to reflect on your own thoughts and mental processes. Knowing that you can be influenced and being able to ask yourself, what's happening? Is this actually my memory, or am I able to have some awareness that things can influence my memory and to not trust my memory so much? Procedural metacognition refers to the online application of knowledge. Online here means instantaneous or while engaged in an activity, rejecting the notion. Well, let's see. Maybe I didn't actually experience this, but somebody told me about it. So, with respect to all these reviews that the authors take forth, and then I'm not even referring to a study that they did at the end of their paper, but it's not clear whether ground rules actually improve performance of children. I don't think anybody would argue that you don't want ground rules, but to just assume, for instance, to tell a child, hey, I don't know what happened, may not increase the accuracy of what children tell you, or may not protect them from influences that you may inadvertently affect while you're questioning them.